Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Thursday, March 18th. We are officially 2 weeks away from opening day. My goodness, it cannot come fast enough. Thank God we will have March Madness NCAA basketball to get us through the next couple of weekends here and right into opening day. Hopefully you guys have filled out your brackets thus far, with Selection Sunday being last Sunday, everybody getting into their pools, submitting their brackets to ESPN or which other type of pool you want to get into here. Who are your Final Four teams? Who do you got out there? Are you going all number ones? I don't think that's a great idea, considering that rarely happens. But Michigan, Illinois, Gonzaga, Baylor, all phenomenal basketball clubs. So who's going to be that top upset in the first round? Is it going to be my Lehigh Mountain Hawks as a number 15 seed over the 2 seed Duke Blue Devils like it was about a decade ago? Obviously, Lehigh's not in it this year, but 115 or 114 seed is going to pull off a heck of an upset like they do year in and year out. So who's your favorite Cinderella? Who's your dark horse to make a run? That's going to be fun to watch here over the next couple of weeks. But we're talking baseball here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Like I said, 2 weeks away from opening day, so we're starting to get down into the nitty-gritty of spring training. Teams are starting to make some roster cuts, send some guys back to the minor leagues, and start to fine-tune some things as they get ready for real baseball that actually counts here shortly. But we got a fantastic episode for you guys here today. First off, wanted to start out with some spring training takeaways through the first couple of weeks, give you guys an update on the standings. Then we're going to talk a little bit of college baseball in segment number 3 and wrap things up by talking about pitchers who can hit. Since 2021 will probably be the last season we'll see pitchers getting at-bats, I wanted to give a segment to the best of all time and then the most fun to watch this year and what you should be looking out for. So, jumping into some takeaways from spring training here, just a couple, and then we're also going to do some injury updates as injuries start to compound across Major League Baseball. But first, right out of the gates, talking some big names here. Number one is Shohei Otani. If you haven't been impressed with what Shohei Otani has done this spring, you just haven't been watching the Angels, because, of course, this guy, he's seen more downs than ups over the course of his career. Last year was just a disaster. He had Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago, couldn't figure anything out, really continued to struggle. But this spring, both offensively and on the mound, he looks like he's back, and he looks like he's as healthy as he's ever been. I mean, so far through the first couple of weeks, he's 7 for 13. He also hit a 468-foot bomb over the batter's eye in center field. His velocity on his fastball is back up. It dipped all the way down to 94 coming off of Tommy John, but now he's back up to averaging 97 and change, topping out in triple digits, 100 miles an hour plus. He's back to showing that effectively on the mound here, and more importantly, he's basically talked about how he's finally found a schedule for each of his spring training days in between each start to be able to keep his arm healthy, keep him ready to go for 162. And then at the plate, he's been able to find certain drills, certain timings to hopefully be the best of both worlds for Shohei Otani. And when I talk to you guys about long shot MVP candidates in the American League, I think Otani was like plus 4,000 or 5,000, meaning win bet $100, win $4,000. I think that's going to be a nice long shot where those odds are going to plummet here throughout the regular season if he continues to perform like he has this spring. Next on the list, Jacob deGrom what he's doing this spring is just otherworldly. I mean, this guy is absolutely insane. He's going to turn 33 years old this year. Been in the bigs for how many years? 6, 7 years. And he just continues to throw harder and harder. I mean, in 2018, he averaged 96.7. In 2019, he averaged 97.2. And then last year, he averaged 99 miles an hour on his fastball. Well, this spring, he's been sitting consistently 100 to 102. So this guy's throwing triple digits consistently now, and he's already been one of the best pitchers in baseball. And for a guy, or for pitchers in general, they typically don't get their arm action back until the weather heats up, till they get back in the groove here a little bit. So thinking if he's throwing 100 miles an hour now, the guy's going to be 102, 103 come summertime when those muscles loosen up, those joints loosen up. And it is just going to be absolutely fascinating to watch this guy pitch. And as a Phillies fan, I'm kind of upset about it. I mean, we got to face this guy enough. Now I'm going to have to sit there watching the television, him painting 102 on the outside black is just, man, something you're not looking forward to as a hitter, that's for sure. So DeGrom, super impressive. Otani, extremely impressive thus far. And then also Jameson Taillon. I mean, this guy, he looks good. He's coming off his second career Tommy John surgery, trying to figure things out here now with the New York Yankees. But one thing I've noticed from Taillon is that he has completely new arm action. He's gone to a much shorter arm action on the takeaway from his knee kick when he gets into his arm slot. He's no longer going all the way down, getting that big loop on the arm action. He's kind of short-arming the baseball a little bit. Lucas Giolito, Tyjon Walker, Joe Kelly, guys like this have kind of adapted this because it hides the baseball more behind your body and it doesn't allow for your arm to drag behind your lower body, because if your arm drags when your lower half is going, it puts a ton of stress on your elbow. So getting kind of that shorter arm action, think more throwing a football where they go right from the chest up to the ear as opposed to all the way down, Kamansky style, AAU back-to-back jams. You go right from here back to the ear, and you're able to disguise the baseball and make sure that your arm is on time with the rest of your body as you're getting into your delivery. So you should check out some videos online in regards to comparisons for his arm action, but it certainly looks like it's working for him. And he's also going through a different style of pitching now with the Yankees. During their time with Pittsburgh loves to work fastballs down in the zone. I mean, Charlie Morton, Tyler Glasnow, Garrett Cole, all of these guys since leaving Pittsburgh have gone more to the new age north-south approach to pitching, which means four-seam fastballs at the top of the zone, tunneling your breaking ball off of that pitch and working that one down in the zone. Well, early returns on Jameson's heat maps are that he's doing just that. His heat maps with Pittsburgh certainly low and away to a right-handed hitter. Now it's a lot more up in the zone. He's trying to work that upper half and then stick down with the breaking ball. So his velocity starting to come back. He's going back to that 94 mile an hour mark, working at the top of the zone, tunneling that breaking ball off of that. It's certainly been fun to watch for Taillon this far here in spring training. Next up, we got the kids, man. I wanted to talk to you guys about a bunch of different prospects, looking at some StatCast, next generation stats, sabermetrics, whatever the heck you want to call it out there. But a lot of these prospects are hitting the crap out of the baseball. I mean, we had Padres outfielder Joshua Mayers. He hit a ball 117.3 miles an hour, the former second-round pick in 2019. And just for reference, in regards to speed of velocity of a hit baseball, only 11 players have hit a ball faster than 117.3 in a big league game the last 2 years. And I don't have those names, but you'll recognize a lot of them right in front of you. So Myers has been fantastic, smoking baseballs, as well as some other guys out there. You have Rockies infielder Brendan Rodgers. He had a single that came off the bat, 115.6. Yankees first baseman Chris Gittens, he hit a grand slam that came out at 114.3. You have Yankees infielder Ezekiel Duran, 112.3, along with Vlad Guerrero Jr., who has 3 baseballs hit over 110 miles an hour. So these guys just can absolutely rake and are smoking baseballs here early in spring. Now, will they stick around for a while? Will any of them be able to make the team? I'm not so sure just yet, but they are certainly showing why they were top prospects and that they can hit Major League pitching extremely hard when it comes down to it. So now I want to talk to you guys about some injuries. Let's see what's going on out there. Some of them not so serious, a lot of muscle tweaks, some pulls early on, but could lead to some guys missing opening day here. First off, you have Steven Strasburg with the Nationals. He had some left calf discomfort and had to exit his second spring training start after only 45 pitches. Walked off the mound. Seems like he will be okay, but they're going to reevaluate him in a week, and they're not looking to rush him back. But if he's out for any extended period of time, that's certainly going to be a shot in the arm for the Nationals here as they look to get back to that World Series championship form that they had back in 2019. For the Cincinnati Reds, they're dealing with a couple of injuries. Sonny Gray he looks like he will be shut down due to back spasms. He missed a start. He just said his back keeps spasming when I rotate, when I throw. So he's going to take some time off, kind of regroup here, but it looks like he will be about a week behind, may miss his first start or two when it comes to the regular season. Next, you have TJ Antone. He exited Sunday's game last Sunday due to a mild right groin strain. He said it felt like a little tweak. He's just going to kind of stretch, do some rehab. A few of his teammates told him not to push it because, this early in the year, if you don't take care of muscle tweaks, they can stick around for months on end, and all of a sudden you'll be going through the entire season dealing with something like that. So they're going to shut him down for a couple of weeks. And then last, Shogo Akiyama. He's dealing with some issues there. He exited his last start after 2 innings due to left hamstring tightness. He injured his hamstring while trying to beat out a ground ball to first base. So certainly looks like he's going to spend some time on the shelf here for the next couple of weeks. You have Carlos Carrasco of the Mets. He was shut down from throwing last Wednesday. He has right elbow soreness. He threw from 75 feet earlier this week without any issue. They're going to push that up to 90 to 120. And if everything goes well, he'll be looking to throw a bullpen session of about 10 to 15 pitches to get back onto routine. But even at this point, if he stays on that routine, doesn't have any setbacks, he's not on point to start the regular season on time. So he's going to miss the first couple of outings for the New York Mets, which is good news for the Phillies because the Phillies schedule, they play the Braves and the Mets for the first 13 games, and it's going to be super important for them to get out to a nice start here. The Oakland A's pitching staff dealing with some issues out there. A.J. Puck, he's been ramping up due to rehab from left shoulder surgery, throwing in some simulated games. So he's going to be missing the first couple of times through the rotation, but could be back in it now that Mike Fiers is dealing with some issues. He had been dealing with some back issues earlier, felt it tighten up Friday, also reported some discomfort in his hip. He's going to have an MRI to see exactly what's going on. Ultimately, he's not looking forward to missing a ton of time. And then lastly, you have Trevor Rosenthal. He was supposed to be the new closer out there, but his debut has been delayed by a groin strain. He's thrown a bullpen session, appears to be close to ready to go. But again, you don't want to push it this early and have a guy tweak a muscle, or have a tweaked muscle turn into a pulled muscle, which turns into 2 to 4 months instead of 2 to 4 weeks. Because you're being aggressive here in the spring. Nico Hoyener for the Cubs. He was scratched due to lower back tightness. He's been killing it for the Cubs here early on, hitting .500, 9 for 18, but he's going to spend a couple of days on the bench, try to loosen up that back and see what happens here moving forward. For the Tampa Bay Rays, you got Brett Phillips dealing with some hamstring tightness. He tweaked the hamstring, scoring from second. In a game this past week, no major cause for concern, but he'll be out a couple of weeks. And then you also have Ji-Man Choi. They're going to shut him down for 1 to 2 weeks here due to right knee inflammation. He dealt with this earlier in the spring, so they're hoping some trips to the heat, the stim, all that good stuff. We'll be able to get him back sooner than later. Austin Nola for the Padres. He has a fractured middle finger on his left hand. That's his non-throwing hand. Doesn't look like he'll be ready for opening day. Similarly to JT Realmuto, who had a fractured thumb. That's about 2 to 4 weeks. So Austin Nola, the Padres starting catcher, not going to be available right from the jump from them. So a tough break for the Padres. Miguel Andujar, he's scheduled to see a specialist about soreness in his right hand and wrist. It's not looking good. He had this discomfort during winter ball and has yet to be able to shake it here moving forward. You have Brad Miller of the Phillies. He was pulled out of the lineup due to an issue with his right oblique. So again, something that you don't want to mess with because we've seen oblique issues come and go and continue to return and hamper guys throughout the course of the regular season. For the Mariners, Jared Kelenic, he took batting practice coming off of his injury that he had to his grade 2 abductor strain in his left knee. So he's working his way back, having some batting practice. Next, you have Roenis Elias. He's coming off a forearm injury, which seemed to be more severe than they had originally hoped. Forearm elbow issue, so they're trying to figure out next steps here moving forward. And then Jake Fraley only had the wind knocked out of him when he ran into the wall a little bit earlier this spring. It looked a lot worse than ultimately it's going to be. Brandon Belt for the Giants, he's starting to feel good. He's coming off off-season heel surgery, had COVID-19, so he's been trying to bounce back. He's been really struggling, so it'll be interesting to see how he starts off the year. And then lastly here for the Toronto Blue Jays, Nate Pearson. He threw a bullpen this past weekend for the first time since straining his right groin last week. All reports say he came out feeling good and will throw another bullpen here in the coming week to try to get back close to on time to be able to contribute when it comes to the regular season. But a lot of small nagging injuries. This is something that happens in spring training as guys start to ramp up. You'll have a tweak of a hamstring, an oblique, a quad, whatever it may be. But again, teams want to be cautious here early in the year to make sure guys are able to contribute for the full length or as much of 162 as humanly possible. So that'll do it here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always. We'll step aside here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we'll give you guys an update on the standings. What's going on around spring training? How's your team doing so far? Stick around and find out.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys listening in. If you guys haven't checked us out on social media yet, please do yourself a favor, do myself a favor. Pull up that Twitter icon on your cell phone there, that little blue bird. You guys know what it looks like. Type in GSMC Baseball into that search bar, and you'll find out our account on there. Give us a follow. We certainly appreciate it. But also check out Facebook. Head to Facebook GSMC Baseball Podcast page. You'll find out all the latest information happening across Major League Baseball, keeping you guys up to date on everything going on across the league out there. As once again, we are only 2 weeks away from opening day. Kind of fascinating how quickly it's coming up on us here as teams are starting to transition from playing a lot of the kids, getting a lot of guys playing time, to now trying to fine-tune some roster decisions. There's some position battles going on across Major League Baseball where you're starting to see guys who are in competition play day in and day out, seeing if they can differentiate themselves, really win a position. So we'll keep you guys posted on all of that good stuff. But also check out the GSMC Podcast Network. The podcast network has pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as other social media platforms. Helping us out by checking those out goes a long way, as we appreciate you guys and everything you do as the wonderful listeners of the baseball podcast out there. So now I wanted to take some time and just dive into some updated standings for spring training. I know, and, this really doesn't have a lot to do with the regular season, and some of these records are going to surprise you when it comes to these teams and where they currently are, and can this carry over into the regular season? Can you flick a switch? Does none of this really matter? And honestly, I don't think team records matter as much as individual performance when it comes to spring training. And yes, you'll see guys who hit $150 in spring training go to the regular season and start mashing all over. But I think that is less common than having teams or pitchers because, again, starting pitchers, they're starting to go 3, 4 innings, 5 innings now in spring training. They'll be going 5, 6, 7 innings come regular season time, come opening day. You're still getting a look at some bullpen opportunities, so you're having some guys who aren't going to be on big league rosters battling with other guys, and they'll be giving up runs, and during the regular season, they won't be on the team, and teams will lose games because somebody gave up 4 runs in the 7th inning who ultimately won't make it for the regular season. So these team records really don't carry over, and there isn't, these guys lit it up during spring training, so absolutely now they're a team to mess with come regular season time. But again, individually, like here in Philadelphia, Scott Kingery is just struggling to put the ball in play. And I don't think come the regular season time, he's going to flick a switch and all of a sudden become a 300 hitter when he's got 10, 11 strikeouts in like 27 plate appearances or whatever it's been so far this spring. So, take these numbers with a grain of salt. One of the, key takeaways I can tell you guys is the Philadelphia Phillies had the best record in the Grapefruit League last year, or, spring training 2.0 or 1.0. And that really doesn't matter just due to coronavirus and everything that took place. But, of course, we all know they were a 500 ball club, slightly under 500, because they haven't been over that mark now for about a decade. But, they're typically a good spring training ball club, and it certainly doesn't carry over into the regular season here. So let's just run down some of these standings, kind of see where some of the surprises lie in regards to teams. And now there are differentiating total amounts of games played when it comes to spring training. Some of this due to weather, some of this due to split squad activity, as well as, even within the Grapefruit League and the Cactus League, they've split them up into 2 different divisions based on location. Geographically, not having a ton of teams travel this spring now. Normally, the Phillies, they'd go all over the state of Florida, but they're kind of keeping them in their little pocket there. So, again, just keeping you guys up to date, and you're going, hey, how's my squad doing so far? I haven't been paying attention. Well, now you guys will know here and have an update as we're 2 weeks away from opening day. Depending on when you guys are listening to this, obviously some of these records may be outdated, but as of time of recording, we have the Miami Marlins coming in at 6-2 atop the Grapefruit League. And recently, Sixto Sanchez, he made his debut down in spring training. Again, this was his first outing. He reached 100 miles an hour, throwing 2 innings for the Fish down there. So just finding his footing, but right out of the gate, throwing 100 miles an hour. Certainly impressive for Sixto Sanchez, and I think he's going to be really good. I mean, he was the key component of that JT Realmuto trade, so certainly somebody here as a Phillies fan is just frustrated watching him continue to shove in what's going on. Germain for the Yankees. The Yankees are in the second place spot at 10-4, and Germain, he continues to cruise for them. He had another nice outing. He's got 13 strikeouts over 9 shutout innings this spring, so very impressive for a guy who's trying to cement himself into the rotation moving forward, and that Yankees offense continues to mash as they've beaten the Phillies a couple of times here moving forward. In third place, you got the Atlanta Braves at 8-6. They have some internal battles going on for some bench spots. Ronald Acuna Jr. hit his 3rd home run in 4 games as he's finding his way here this spring. The Braves, certainly, as we mentioned, a very good team in the National League, somebody to look at. Next, we have the Toronto Blue Jays at 8-6, tied with Atlanta there in 4th place. And as I mentioned, Pearson trying to come back. Ryu looks good. He continues to roll, and the offense should be good for Toronto as they continue here moving forward. Next, we have the last 2 teams over 500, the New York Mets and the Boston Red Sox. The Mets at 6-5 and the Red Sox at 7-6. The Mets, Guillemore, I think is the guy's name, how you pronounce it. He had a 22-pitch at-bat the other day, if you guys didn't see that. It was just absolutely wild. He was 0-2, fouling off a ton of pitches, and just 22 pitches for an at-bat. I think personally my longest at-bat was like 11 or 12. I couldn't imagine being in there for another 10 pitches and continuing to go at it. For the Red Sox, they're 7-6, and Sawamura made his debut coming over from Japan. He got hit around a little bit, had trouble finding the zone. He's learning to adjust to the new baseballs over here, trying to find his footing, had some nerves, all of that good stuff, but certainly a nice debut for Sawamura there in the Red Sox. At 7-7, we got 3 teams, the Detroit Tigers, Philadelphia Phillies, and Pittsburgh Pirates. All 7-7. The Tigers, they're having a bunch of kids continuing to figure things out. They also have a Rule 5 draft pick who's done very well. Akil Baddoo. He wasn't supposed to make the roster, but he's certainly making a push to be involved here moving forward. For the Phillies, you have JT Realmuto continuing to come back. You got Chase Anderson, Matt Moore doing very well at the back end of the rotation, so nice. Good work for them. And then you got the Pirates, who we're not going to spend a bunch of time on at 7-7. You have the Cardinals and the Nationals at 5-5 so far this spring. The Cardinals, they're continuing to find their way, figure out their rotation, figure out their lineup, but an early 500 record for them. And then the Washington Nationals, Max Scherzer looked like himself again on the mound this past Monday. He had 7 strikeouts and only 4 innings as he's starting to ramp up to get towards the regular season. And then the last 4 here in the Grapefruit League, and the surprise at the bottom, you got the Minnesota Twins at 6-7. The Tampa Bay Rays are at 5-9. Baltimore is 4-10. And then you have the Houston Astros coming in at 3-8 in the basement. The Astros recently named Zach Greinke their opening day starter, as well as Alex Bregman will look to make his debut this past week here and coming off that hamstring injury. So Miami and New York leading the way in the Grapefruit League. Now out to the Cactus League. We got a surprise team at the top. The Kansas City Royals, 12-3 so far this spring training. Danny Duffy threw 4 perfect innings against the Giants earlier this week. For his debut at spring training, looked fantastic. Man, if Kansas City can get some pitching, maybe they can surprise some people this year. Second place, you got the Dodgers at 8-4. Of course, everybody knows how deep and talented the Dodgers are, so not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. You have the Chicago Cubs at 7-5, Texas at 6-5, and the Angels at 7-6 as the only other teams over 500. So again, Hoyner trying to return to the bullpen for them coming off the injury. The Cubs trying to figure out ultimately who's going to be in that rotation, who's going to be in the bullpen, and where can they take it from there. You have the Texas Rangers at 6-5. Like we mentioned, a solid start to the spring down there in Texas, as they don't look to be that great of a ball club, so certainly excellent. And then the Angels at 7-6. We touched on Shohei Otani and how electric he's been. He hit 2 home runs in a game earlier this spring and continues to dazzle on the mound. So certainly a nice spring thus far for the Angels. Next at 7-7, we have the Colorado Rockies, the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Oakland A's. All 3 of those teams. The Rockies should be down in the standings when it comes to the regular season. But they've shown some nice flashes here in spring training. They got roughed up by the Dodgers earlier this week, but who doesn't at this point? And, so Gray was fantastic. He increased some velo for them. Should be a nice little outing for them moving forward. Then you got the Brewers right behind them. So far, so good for Milwaukee when it comes to this spring. They did get beat up by the Padres the other day, but nothing to really sneeze at if you're the Brewers. And then the Oakland A's continuing this forward. They have some outfield competition they're still trying to figure out. Who's going to make the opening day roster? Fires could miss opening day. Manea finally made his debut, so starting to fine-tune some things out there in Oakland as we're working closer and closer to opening day. We have the San Francisco Giants at 6-6. They haven't played a lot of games. Weather, things like that kind of getting to them. So they're trying to find their way here in spring training. And then you have the Cleveland Indians and San Diego Padres at 7-8. The Cleveland Indians, they're trying to figure out a couple of different position battles. You got shortstop for them, a bit of an outfield, center field, back end of the rotation, first base. They got a couple of different things going on there in Cleveland that they're trying to figure it out. And then San Diego, who is 7-8, starting to turn up the heat as it comes to opening day and get ready for the regular season. I mentioned Austin Nola suffered that recent injury with the fractured finger, so he'll be out opening day. But Fernando Tatis Jr. continues to rake. Their pitching staff starting to hone things in here, and no worries so far out in San Diego when it comes to the Padres. Arizona at 6-8 is right behind them, in Seattle at 4-6, only playing 10 games for Seattle thus far. But Arizona, they had Weaver. They welcomed back Luke Weaver. He threw in a simulated game for the first time, coming off some injuries. Things went well for him. He's looking to get into some spring training action here very soon moving forward. And then in Seattle, we touched on it. Kelenic, he's working back closer to return based on that knee injury. Took some batting practice. He feels good. Gonzalez, he was very good his last outing. Their top guy in the rotation. So the top end of Seattle, they're feeling good about themselves as they continue to push forward. And then the bottom two out here, kind of a surprise. Again, you have the Cincinnati Reds at 4-10. They've been hit by the injury bug so far, which in the infield has shifted Suarez to shortstop. That's where he's going to be because they lost Freddie Galvis. Ultimately, who's going to play shortstop for him? Sonny Gray may miss some starts here moving forward, so he's likely going to miss opening day, a time or two through the rotation. There's some trouble in Cincinnati when it comes to figuring everything out. And then the last place team, again, I'm not reading too much into it, but if you're a White Sox fan, certainly not what you wanted to see thus far, as the White Sox are 3-8 when it comes to spring training, or 3-8-1 as they ended up tying the Cubs earlier this week, 4-4 after 10 innings. But they named Lucas Giolito opening day starter, Dallas Keuchel behind him, of course, Lance Lynn, and the offense starting to come around on the south side. But all things considered, Tony La Russa looks to be doing a fantastic job winning over the locker room. A lot of the guys have come out in support of Tony La Russa, who was a bit of a controversial hire originally when he was brought on, but he's done some nice work to get to know the guys, let them know that he is invested. Hopefully they are invested into the 2021 season, and it'll be fascinating to see ultimately how all of that plays out over the course of the summer. But like I mentioned, the Grapefruit League, the top four teams, you got the Marlins, the Yankees, the Braves, and the Blue Jays, all over 500 within 2 games of first place. And then in the Cactus League, the Kansas City Royals, 12-3, 2.5 games up on the Dodgers, with the Cubs and Rangers not far behind them. So we'll see if those teams can keep it up and win themselves a spring training title here in 2021. But that'll do it for segment number 2 here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll step aside here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we're going to talk college baseball. Was there any movement in the polls? Not at the top of the list, but down in the meat of the top 25, we see some newcomers. So stick around to find out if your favorite college team is now in the top 25. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Have you guys hit given us a 5-star rating yet? Whatever platform you're listening on, whether it's Apple Podcast, click that star all the way on the right. Give us a 5-star review. Leave us a comment if you guys, based on last Monday's episode, what are your top rule suggestions for Major League Baseball? What would you implement? Did you like my idea for the home run derby after 10 innings? What are you guys thinking out there? Leave me a comment. Let me know. We'll read them here on the show. As well as if you're on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, whatever it is, hit subscribe, hit follow, hit like. That way, whenever the new episodes are released, you guys will be notified right away to your device, whether it's iPhone, Android, whatever it is, Galaxy out there. You'll get the latest and greatest coming from the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Do yourself a favor. Check out the other shows within the network as well. Whatever search bar you got there, the magnifying glass, type in GSMC, and you'll see a ton of different programs come up. All of them are fantastic. You have book reviews taking place. You got other sports if you're into sports. The NFL free agency came at you fast this week. New England Patriots making a ton of moves. Baltimore, Buffalo, Cleveland, a lot of other teams making some signings. Will we get a Russell Wilson trade coming up here? Follow along to the football podcast to keep up to date with all of the latest moves. And then, like I mentioned, March Madness is going on. So if you guys aren't following the basketball podcast, do yourself a favor and check those out. That way your bracket will, continue to be the best because, today's the day. So you got to get it in by today, with tomorrow being Friday, opening day, opening round throughout the weekend. So like, rate, and review the podcast. Check out the other shows within the network. We certainly appreciate it here. So now we're going to dive into college baseball for segment number 3. I like to keep you guys updated on the college game. A lot of people don't follow college baseball, unlike college football, which certainly has its own little market there. So what's going on across the college world? And honestly, it was a little bit of a slow weekend when it came to the top 25. The top 5 teams all remain the same. The SEC continues to own the top 5, starting out with the top team, the Arkansas Razorbacks. They won 2 out of 3 against Louisiana Tech, and their conference year will start this weekend with Alabama coming to town, followed up by a trip to Mississippi State the following weekend, and Mississippi State currently ranked 3rd. So the weekend of March 26th, 7th, and 8th, going to be a fantastic weekend for SEC baseball. So if Arkansas can get through Alabama, setting up a nice matchup a couple of weeks from now. Number 2, we have the Vanderbilt Commodores. Vanderbilt had a nice weekend. They took 2 out of 3 from Oklahoma State. They traveled to Oklahoma State. Doubleheader Saturday, losing on Sunday, but they remain in the number 2 slot. They open up conference play versus South Carolina this coming weekend. So the SEC will get into conference play with conferences like the ACC already having 3 or 4 conference series. Just goes to show how these teams have really differentiated when it comes to schedules. Now, the SEC, of course, doesn't have to deal with the weather because the ACC going all the way up to Pennsylvania, the city of Boston, Massachusetts, and those teams have to go down south in order to play at the end of February, beginning of March. No concerns there when it comes to the SEC, so they can play out-of-conference opponents and not have to get into right into conference games in order to travel like the ACC has. And number 3 team, Mississippi State. They welcomed Eastern Michigan. They swept Eastern Michigan this weekend. They will now face LSU when it comes to next weekend in conference play. LSU at number 19. So they'll face 19, and then number 1 Arkansas in back-to-back weekends here coming up. So we'll find out if Mississippi State is for real here sooner than later over the next couple of weekends. It'll be fascinating to see how the Bulldogs are continuing to perform. Number 4, you got Ole Miss. Ole Miss, they had themselves a weekend, took 2 out of 3 against Louisiana Monroe. They will face Auburn and then Alabama over the next 2 weekends when it comes to conference tournament play or conference play to see really how they stack up. Next on the list, we got number 5, the Florida Gators. What did they do this weekend? Well, they took 2 out of 3 from Jacksonville. So the top 5 all take 2 out of 3, which didn't allow anybody to jump up here and really make a move. Now, they do have a midweek game with Florida State this week. We'll see how that one goes. and then they open up with Texas A&M, followed by South Carolina, coming up on conference play. Now, interesting here is that Miami's at number 6, and Miami did take 2 out of 3 opening weekend this year from Florida. So if you're a football fan going, okay, well, how are they 5-6 when 6 beat 5, 2 out of 3 head-to-head? I mean, Miami had dumped a couple. They fell to number 8. Now they're all the way back up to number 6 after a nice win, undefeated week last week. They took 2 out of 3 from Wake Forest, had to pause Sunday's game due to COVID protocols. But they've now won 5 in a row after a little stretch there where they had lost 3 of 4. They'll continue their matchup or conference schedule here with Florida State this upcoming weekend. So Miami, Florida State, everybody knows that rivalry from their time on the gridiron, wide left, wide right. But the baseball teams certainly don't like each other either, and that'll be a nice matchup within the ACC. At number 7, we have Texas Tech. They are on a hot streak. They've won 10, 11, 12 games in a row here. They swept UConn in a 4-game series. Now they enter conference play, welcoming Oklahoma State to campus this weekend. So Texas Tech started out losing 4 in a row, or 3 in a row, and now has won 14 straight. So Texas Tech getting hot, continuing to climb in the rankings all the way back up to number 7. And the top-ranked team from the Big 12 is the Red Raiders. Now Louisville comes in, the second-ranked ACC team. This past weekend, they swept Boston College at home, which was a nice matchup. We talked last week about how BC had their highest ranking in program history at number 17, but was unable to win a game down there against Louisville. And Louisville will travel to NC State this upcoming weekend to face the Wolfpack here in a nice conference matchup. East Carolina next on the list at number 9. They have yet to get into conference play. They swept Charlotte this past weekend in 3 games. They then play Illinois State before getting into conference play against St. John's in a couple of weeks. Once again, these northern teams, they have yet to kind of figure things out. Cincinnati, St. John's trying to get into conference play. Texas comes in at number 10. They jump all the way up from number 19. They raised 9 points in the rankings. It was the biggest leap of any team in this week here compared to last week. They swept South Carolina at home, make it 5 straight victories. Next up, they travel to Baylor to start their Big 12 play with a visit from Oklahoma coming soon after that. So a 4-0 weekend from the Texas Longhorns jumps them all the way up from number 19 to number 10. The UCLA Bruins at number 11. They continue to struggle. Another 2-2 week drops them down from number 6 down to number 11 as they lose 2 out of 3 to Cal Poly. And that's not a good weekend for the Bruins out there as they're jumping right into conference play against Arizona coming up here shortly. So UCLA going to have to figure things out at 10-5 this year. Certainly a disappointment early on, and they fall from number 6 to number 11. Next on the list, you got Georgia Tech. They fall from number 7 to number 12 after Pittsburgh took 2 out of 3 down in Atlanta this weekend. A couple of games were shootouts. Pittsburgh won game 1, 11-9, and then game 3, 18-12. And we're going to hear Pittsburgh's name once again coming up here in just a little bit as we continue down the rankings. Tennessee comes in at number 13. They are 14-3 overall. They swept UNC Greensboro this weekend. They'll get into SEC action with a trip to Georgia coming up this weekend. So Tennessee, Georgia should be a good one when it comes to the SEC slate. Oklahoma State, number 14. They are 11-2-1. Yes, they got a tie. They got a travel curfew. They had to hit the road, catch a flight. So they tied Grand Canyon, but they lost 2 out of 3 to Vanderbilt this past weekend. So Oklahoma State, Vanderbilt was a nice matchup, and Oklahoma only fell from 13 to 14 because Vanderbilt, obviously the number 2 ranked team in the country, they were able to bounce back and take game 3 after losing Saturday 18-4. So a nice recovery by Oklahoma State. And again, they get Texas Tech this weekend. So you have the number 17 playing the number 14 team in Big 12 baseball. TCU comes in at number 15 at 10-6 on the year. They did lose 2 out of 3 against Gonzaga this past weekend, so not a great weekend for the Horned Frogs down there at TCU going against the Zags. The Zags are not as good in baseball as they are in basketball as the number 1 overall seed. The number 16 seed, or number 16 team, we have South Carolina. They're 11-3 overall. They got swept by Texas, so they came in 11-0, and then they got swept by Texas, and they fell from number 12 to number 16, and now they're going to go to Vanderbilt this next weekend. So a tough stretch here for the Gamecocks, and hopefully they can figure things out now facing the number 2 team in the country. Now we have a big jump as well from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They go from 25th up to 17th. As they had another nice weekend in the ACC. They swept Virginia after taking 2 out of 3 from Clemson. So the Irish continue to play good baseball, 7-2 overall, and they will have their first home series of the year as they welcome the Duke Blue Devils to South Bend, Indiana this weekend. And now I mentioned it earlier, but the Pitt Panthers enter the rankings at number 18. This is their highest ranking overall in team history, as they were unranked last week. They're now 9-4 on the year, but 6-3 in ACC play, including a series sweep at Florida State, who was top 10 at the time, and now a series win at Georgia Tech, who was top 10 at the time. Their offense continues to show up, scoring 11 runs and then 18 runs, and now they face a struggling Virginia Cavaliers team this weekend as they travel back down to Virginia. Haven't played a home series yet, so Pitt, if they can continue to stay hot, can continue to climb in the rankings, but their coach there has them playing good baseball in Pittsburgh. LSU, a national power at number 19. They're having a solid stretch here, winning 5 in a row. They swept UTSA this past weekend, and they open up with Mississippi State now when it comes to SEC play. Again, the number 3 ranked team in the country LSU will face coming up here. And we have the Oregon Ducks at number 20. Oregon had themselves a nice weekend, taking 2 out of 3 from Oregon State to start Pac-12 play. They will now face Arizona State at home, followed by a trip to Arizona over the next 2 weekends. So Oregon looking to continue their rise as they were unranked last weekend as well, and now find themselves at number 20. Number 21 on the list, UC Santa Barbara. They were number 22 last week, so they continue to hold steady. They're 9-5 overall. They swept San Francisco after bouncing back after getting swept by Oregon. So that's where they were able to stabilize, and now have Cal State Fullerton coming up this next week here as they move forward. Number 22 on the list, we have the Michigan Wolverines. They are 7-1 on the year, and the Big Ten went right into conference play this year. No non-conference matchups for the Big Ten. We haven't heard any Big Ten names thus far, to be honest with you. So Michigan, the top team in the Big Ten, at 7-1. They had a 5-0 week. They took 3 out of 4 from Iowa out of the gates, and then this past week, a 4-game sweep against Purdue at home. Now they have 2 versus Illinois coming up this weekend and 2 versus Michigan State as their schedules continue to be a little bit funky in the Big Ten. But Michigan at 7-1 joins the rankings after being unranked last week. Number 23, Oregon State. They are 11-3 this year. They lost 2 out of 3 to Oregon, so a bit of a dump for them there. They fall from 16 to 23, but look to bounce back against the Cougars of Washington State here coming up next weekend. Number 24, we have Boston College. So we mentioned how they had a tough weekend being swept at Louisville. They remain in the rankings at number 24. They'll look to bounce back against North Carolina in ACC play this weekend. And then we have Virginia Tech, who fell all the way to 25 from number 18 after losing 2 out of 3 to Florida State at home in ACC play. They will now travel to Clemson coming up here this weekend. And a couple of teams that dropped out, Florida Atlantic, West Virginia, and Arizona, no longer ranked after being 20 through 25. Florida Atlantic losing 2 out of 3 to Indiana State, remove them from the rankings. West Virginia, they lost 2 out of 3 to Central Michigan, which was able to push them to 5-5 overall and drop them out. And then Arizona losing a couple of games to Wichita State and Air Force this weekend. They'll face UCLA, looking to get back into the rankings. So that's your top 25 in college baseball. Again, the top 5 all SEC teams Next up, we have the ACC as kind of the conferences, the top two there. The Big 12 involved, the Pac-12 involved, and the Big 10 not getting a lot of love with the Michigan Wolverines being the only team ranked there. But again, they had a late start in the Big 10 because they're not playing non-conference games, and the weather wouldn't allow them to compete up there in the Midwest this early on in the year. So we should see some of those teams enter the rankings as some teams have some nice starts in the Big 10. That'll do it here for segment number 3. Hopefully you guys enjoy being updated here on college baseball. I know there's not a lot of love or publicity for college ball, so I love sharing with you guys what's going on, keeping you up to date with all the latest teams, rankings, and everything that's happening there. So we'll step aside here now one last time for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, I'm going to talk to you guys about the greatest hitting pitchers, both current and all-time, because this may be the last summer we see pitchers get at-bats in Major League Baseball. Stick around, everyone. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back after this.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. It is our fourth and final segment here on Thursday, March 18th. We're going to have some fun. Let's talk about pitchers that can rake. Who's been the most fun to watch for you guys? Because I know I'm going to miss some guys here over the next 15 minutes or so, and there's going to be a few of you out there. Leave them in the comments. Let me know who was the most fun to watch when they were hitting as a pitcher. Now, I'm not talking particular moments, right? Because for me, I mean, Joe Blanton hitting a home run in Game 4 of the World Series in 2008 off the Tampa Bay Rays is something that I will never forget. The Phillies were just absolutely crushing the Rays, and then Joe Blanton ran into a fastball and put it in the seats, and Blanton, who had thrown for the Athletics in the American League, was never known as a hitter, so for him to just run into one was outstanding. So what are your favorite moments like that? I mean, there's certain guys who you guys are certainly going to think of while listening to this, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments who your favorites were when they were taking place. But looking at 2021, who are some guys who are going to rake? I mean, and who are some guys who aren't, who are just as entertaining to watch? Because some pitchers, you know, they stand in the box like Henry Rowan-Gardner from Rookie of the Year, all the way back and all the way out, just enough to be in that white square in order to have it count as an at-bat. So there's a couple of guys on here who have struggled, who are fun, and then we're going to get into some of the top all-time pitching hitters and some of the all-time seasons that they had as hitters when it comes to pitchers. But a couple of guys on the list in no particular order here. Start now. I mean, we got Jake Arrieta. Jake Arrieta, he's back with the Cubbies. He was in Philadelphia, but now he's back with the Cubs. He's hit a couple of home runs in some playoff series. He also leads all active pitchers with 4 triples. So there's a trivia question for you. Which pitcher has the most triples currently? It's Jake Arrieta, something I would not have guessed. I didn't have him being the most fleet of foot or, you know, the most athletic guy out there. So he's got 6 home runs in the regular season and leads all pitchers with 4 triples. So it'll be fun to watch Arrieta swing the bat once again. Next up, we got Madison Bumgardner. He's one who I honestly miss watching hit. I mean, this guy can absolutely rake. He has 7 of the 15 hardest hit balls by a pitcher in the history of StatCast. I mean, 7 of the top 15. That's pretty impressive when you break it down. He's also got 4 out of the top 5. The only other guy on there is Daniel Megden, who hit a single at 112. But Bumgardner, home run, and a flyout. 4 out of the top 5 hardest hit balls when it comes to pitchers in the StatCast era. So this guy can swing it. The list of pitchers that he's gone yard off of in his career is absolutely electric. He's got 19 career home runs. So that is second most for a pitcher all time in the expansion era. The number 1 is Carlos Zambrano. So again, Carlos Zambrano, a ton of fun to watch as he was to hit. He's a guy who I didn't necessarily think of, but he was fantastic. So Bumgardner's 19 home runs. Zambrano had 24. But of the 19, he's taken Clayton Kershaw deep twice. He's taken Zach Greinke deep twice. He's homered off of DeGrom. He's homered off of Chris Bassett. He's homered off of Hyun-Jin Ryu. I mean, that's a pretty solid list when it comes to guys you've taken deep if you're a position player, let alone a pitcher with what's going on. Next, we got Steven Bralt of the Pittsburgh Pirates. This guy had a .333 average back in 2019. That's the 7th highest mark by a pitcher in the expansion era. I mean, when it comes to average, .333 is pretty good. So that the lefty has a chance to defend his batting title as he will be back here in 2021 with the Pirates, and maybe something to look forward to if you're a Pittsburgh fan. You got Cabron Hayes, and you also got Steven Bralt as your offensive juggernauts there for the Pirates. Then you got Johnny Cueto. No other pitcher has more plate appearances without a home run than Jody Cueto. And that's why I'm watching Johnny Cueto to see if he can go yard this year. He's come to bat 618 times without going yard. And I mean, Cueto, the guy swings like Happy Gilmore. He just kind of runs into it, a little hop, a little run. And if Bartolo Colon can run into one and take somebody deep, I mean, Johnny Cueto, maybe he gets lucky this year and he finds a 4-bagger and, gets off the schneid. So Cueto, just fun to watch. But next is Yu Darvish, who he's been quoted as saying that anybody older than 33 should be able to choose whether or not they want to hit. And he is not very fond of hitting. So, again, he doesn't like hitting, but he also has at least home run to his card. He went yard in 2016 against Tim Adelman of the Reds. So Cueto may love to hit, hasn't gone yard. Darvish hates to hit, and he's already hit a home run here. So it'll be fun to watch Yu Darvish swing the bat here once again. Next up, who do we have here? Let's see. John Gant of the Cardinals. Gant is 2 for 44 as a pitcher, and both of them are home runs. That's fantastic. I mean, only one other guy has ever had at least 3 career hits, and all of them have been home runs, and his name is Keith McDonald. So can John Gant join Keith McDonald as the only guy in Major League history to hit 3 or more hits, and each one of them be a home run? It'll be fascinating to see. I also have Zach Greinke on the list. Yes, he's in the American League against the Astros, but he will have interleague play. And Greinke was recently quoted as people were talking to him about milestones and what would 250 wins, 2,500 strikeouts, what's that mean to you? And he basically said he set one career goal for himself, and that was to have 10 career home runs and 10 stolen bases. And honestly, I was like, what's he talking about? But then I did some research, and you find out that only 3 pitchers in the history of baseball, or the modern era, I guess you call it, since 1990, are part of the 10 and 10 club. You got Walter Johnson, Bucky Walters, and Bob Gibson. So nobody that's played in my lifetime has been able to hit that 10-10 club, and it'll be fascinating to see if Greinke can get there this year because he currently has 9-9. And if you see some highlights, he's been picked off due to trying to steal some bases, getting huge leads, trying to get that 10th steal. You can really tell it matters to him. So it'll be just fascinating to see him try to reach that milestone. That clearly means a lot to him. Next, we got Jon Lester. I mean, Lester, what can you say? He started his career going 0 for 66 before he finally had an infield single back in 2015. now at 37 years old, I mean, the guy, he does have a homer in 2017, 18, and 19, so he can run into a baseball from time to time, but certainly a funny at-bat, somebody fun to watch. He kind of just closes his eyes, swings hard, and maybe the ball will hit the bat type of approach for Jon Lester when it comes to offensively moving forward. Then you got a couple of guys who can actually hit a little bit. You got Michael Lorenzen, of course. He's kind of a two-way guy. Again, Shohei Otani. I'm not putting those guys on the list, but they're fun to watch when they can. You got Jermaine Marquis. Marquis swings from his tail. I mean, goodness gracious. Looking at a breakdown, he has swung at 60% of pitches that he's seen in his career. It's one of the highest in the history of baseball. So if you're throwing anything to Marquis, the guy's taking a hack at it. And he ran into a baseball once, 447-foot home run, which is just fascinating for a pitcher. But don't be surprised if Marquis taking some hacks out there. He is the definition of do not get cheated in the batter's box. You then have Adam Wainwright. He's 39 years old, but he's second active behind Bumgardner in a lot of hitting categories for pitchers. He's second in home runs with 10, but he's first with RBIs, or first in hits, 136, RBIs 71, and runs scored at 54. So the guy can swing the bat there, Adam Wainwright in St. Louis. And then last year we got Brandon Woodruff. Woodruff, left-handed hitter. He had 2 home runs in 2018, including one in the postseason. He followed that up by having a 267 average in 2019. So he took a year off, but we'll see, man, if he can keep swinging it there for Milwaukee. So let's talk about some of the best hitting seasons of all time for pitchers. And honestly, I'm going to remove Babe Ruth when it comes to this particular equation. When it comes to the top hitting pitchers of all time, Babe Ruth comes up on a ton of lists. But again, I can't count him as a pitcher, even though he was. So I put him in a different offensive category. So next on the list, we have Don Newcomb in 1955 for the Dodgers. He hit .359 with 7 home runs and 125 plate appearances. Newcomb grew up in the Negro Leagues where all guys were baseball players, quote unquote. They were expected to hit. He was a fantastic athlete. He was actually used as a pinch hitter 88 times in his career, and he goes down as one of the best hitting pitchers in the history of baseball, with his 1955 season being one of the best across the board. Next, we have Wes Farrell, 1935 for the Boston Red Sox. And Farrell, he's one of the best hitting pitchers in all of baseball. He's on all of these lists. He hit .280 for his career. In 1935 was probably his best year. He hit .347, 7 home runs, and just under 180 plate appearances. Again, this was back in the 30s, so nothing I have ever seen in person here, but he was used as a pinch hitter 127 times in his career. So I don't know if the benches were shortened back in the history of baseball, or if these guys were just expected to go both ways here. Next up, we got Bucky Walters in 1939. The guy hit .325 in 131 plate appearances. He started his professional career as a third baseman, which kind of gives you some insight into why he was a very good hitter, but eventually became a pitcher and was unable to play every day. He showed some promise. He won the NL MVP award as a pitcher, but also had his best year at the plate that same year. He went 27-11 and hit .325 to take home the award in 1939. Heck of a year for Bucky Walters. Next, we have Walter Johnson in 1925. He hit .433 with 20 RBIs, also had 20 wins that year on the mound. He wasn't a great hitter for all of his career, but again, he got hot from time to time and had a .433 average back in 1925. Let's see, Red Ruffing in 1939. 1939, a great year offensively for the pitching staffs. Red Ruffing hit .307 with 20 RBIs and 124 plate appearances. He's a Hall of Fame pitcher, but also a really good hitter. that was his best year. He also hit .364 in 1930. In 1928, he hit .314. So just a good hitter for him, man. A couple of years hitting over 300. You had Don Drysdale, the 1965 Dodgers. He hit 300 with 7 home runs in 138 plate appearances. That was definitely an outlier for his career because he hit a $163 for the rest of his career and then hit 300 in 1965. Warren Spahn, 1958 Braves, Span. They had a .333 average in 122 plate appearances. He hit a $194 for his career, but he also had 35 home runs, which was the most for any National League pitcher at the time. 1958 was the only time he hit 300 in his career, so ran into some baseballs that year. Then you had Jack Bentley, the 1923 Senators. He hit .427 in 94 plate appearances. Fantastic offensive year. And then Micah Owens comes in at one of the best all-time in 2007. There you go, the most recent one showing up on the list. Micah Owens hit .333 with 12 extra base hits and 64 plate appearances. So wasn't that great on the mound, Owens, but had a nice offensive year at the plate. You also had Zach Britton, had a nice year where he went 5 for 8 with a homer and a double. His .625 batting average would have been the highest ever, of course, only having 8 plate appearances. And Johnny Liddell in 1953 had a solid year as well. So who were some of the guys I didn't mention? Once again, I mean, we touched on Carlos Zambrano. Is it Bartolo Colon? Watching him try to hit a home run. Who are some of the pitchers that you guys enjoy swinging the bat and you guys love watching who are the best all time? CC Sabathia during his time in the National League. He was fun to watch. Who else out there? Dontrell Willis. There's another one. Fantastic name for the Marlins. He was a ton of fun to watch swing the bat, man. Dontrell, the D-Train. He was a good one. So that does it for today's episode, though. Hopefully you guys had a lot of fun listening in. Once again, 2 weeks away from opening day. It is coming on us hot and heavy here. But we had a fantastic episode giving you guys an update on spring training, the standings, talking some college baseball, and then talking pitchers who can rake. Who's the best hitting pitcher of all time? Once again, let me know in the comments. But before I let you guys go, please rate and review the podcast. Share us with one of your friends. Hit that like, subscribe, follow button on all the social media pages. That helps us continue to grow as we move forward here into 2021, and which should be a fantastic baseball season. So hopefully you guys are having a great week out here thus far. We are cruising towards the weekend out there. I appreciate you guys listening as always. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll talk to you guys again soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.